We're going to reconvene from recess, and we're going to have staff introduce the matter. Staff, would you begin?
Good evening, commissioners, and to the public that's here for the hearing. I'd like to thank the staff that's also here to hear this public hearing agenda tonight. Obviously, a little bit different venue, but very much the same presentation as you heard at the Kepler Theater a few weeks ago. We'll roll through this fairly quickly for you so you have plenty of time to hear the folks in the audience speak. FY 2020 budget presentation is what we're here to address, and with that, the FY 2020 Citizens Guide to the budget is available. If you did everyone get one of those? Okay. And I think we can have more copies. It is also available online at www.washco-md.net. And if you can't get one, please see a staff member. We'll be sure to get you one. With that, the commissioners here tonight. And next slide. I'd like to point out on this slightly smaller screen than we had at Kepler Theater, but I'd like to point out that at the very top of this organizational chart are the citizens of Washington County. And it's important to recognize that's why we're here to hear from them in this budget hearing, as well as the organizations that we may also hear from tonight. Want to take this opportunity as we look at a budget of over $200 million, what actually comes out of that, and that entails economic development, education, human services, infrastructure, public safety. Those 5 service lines have been identified to address the diversity of Washington County government, 24/7, 365, 911 Operations Center, which supports fire and emergency services, public safety, and the sheriff's office. Also to a pothole on a roadway, a bridge, a traffic signal. All of those services are provided in those 5 service lines, not to mention the others which are now included in this future budget year, Commission on Aging, the Washington County Museum, et cetera, et cetera. Again, we've narrowed that down so that it's clear for both staff and the public of the diversity of work, yet the collaboration necessary to perform all that work each day here at Washington County government. So one thing we are seeking to do, and under the board's direction and simple business practice, is to increase business retention and also improve business attraction. That is all done to improve the tax base so that minimal tax rate increases are necessary whenever they can be avoided by an increased tax base. That is obviously the preferred method. Evidence of that effort is the MEDA Award, Maryland Economic Development Association, which recently awarded our Business Development Office the Making Connections campaign, the MEDA Award for the Making Connections campaign to establish increased convenience to the public as well as public safety and economic development through additional roadways using public and private dollars, both. And as recently reported in the Herald Mail, the highest annual GDP growth in Maryland in recent years. Another evidence of that through collaboration with state government is the relocation of the C&O Canal headquarters to Williamsport, in which, of course, the National Park Service and Kevin Brandt were involved as well. All evidence of the county's efforts to improve the quality of life and the tax base here in Washington County. So with those 5 service lines, very quickly, first is education. I'd like to go through these as a reminder for what Washington County government is doing in the existing budget. That is increasing, or the proposed budget, I should say, that is increasing operation allocation to the Board of Education by $2 million over what was provided in fiscal year 2019. Maintain $4 million in local funds to match state dollars for capital projects for the Board of Education. Sharpsburg Elementary and Barbara Ingram are well underway. Not too far from here, you can see the results of the investment by the state and your local tax dollars, approved by the Board of County Commissioners in the Barbara Ingram improvements about to be complete. State and local funding combined totals of 286.6. Do have to ask a question. This may have actually been updated with additional funding that was just recently reported.
I think it's more than that at this time. So
Yeah. So I think we are at close to $290 million for the total Board of Education budget today, as proposed for fiscal year 2020. Human Services, community organization funding. I mentioned gaming. Commission on Aging, which is now funded at $821,000. Gaming grants to nonprofits totaling almost $1 million. Museum of Fine Arts, $120,000, and $350,000 in hotel revenue tax over the next 5 years. Maryland Theater, $455,000 of hotel revenue tax over 4 years. Total funding separate from that is approximately $2.5 million. And in addition, downtown funding for USMH, $250,000, which has helped with the various campaigns that they are improving the downtown and the education access downtown. Infrastructure, we have $56,319,000 in the capital budget, dedicated $1 million in earlier work this year for fiscal year 20 to a grant application for the improvements of Interstate 81. That was absolutely necessary to make a competitive grant for those Interstate 81 improvements, moving beyond Williamsport, northbound and southbound if you're at Halfway Boulevard, to improve to a three-lane interstate in each direction. Capacity and treatment sewer enhancements are also involved in the capital budget. Road and bridge improvements of approximately $10 million. Highlights of that are Professional Boulevard, Halfway Boulevard, Roxbury Road Bridge, and projects currently underway using monies that will be spent in 2020. Eastern Boulevard, Colonel HK, Douglas Drive, and Creighton Boulevard, all improvements to be made in the local transportation network which will help economic development. Public safety, as President Klein originally said and has been said many times since, as far as public safety, fire and EMS, they have answered our call and it's time for us to answer theirs. FY 2020 public safety budget to address that is $53.8 million. Provides funding for 29 new firefighters in a phase 2 staffing plan, and provides $1 million for emergency services. Fire being obviously fire, as the name states, emergency services being medical technicians and ambulances. And accounting for accountability. What we've taken the direction, as I reported to the commissioners earlier today, accounting RFP, that's a request for proposal for accounting practices to measure the expenditure of all taxpayer dollars that go out to both fire and EMS services, is on the street. We do expect within the next 2 weeks that the bids for those will come into the county commissioners for the approval and final recommendation for that accounting firm to review taxpayer dollar expenditures toward public safety, such as fire and EMS. Moving on, this FY 2020, this is an important statement, is twofold. The FY 2020 budget is indeed twofold. One is attempting to reduce current expenses. As you can see by the number there, that has been accomplished in the proposal by $7.5 million, while also planning for future. That has been proposed in the budget with the increases that Sarah will speak to momentarily by $4.1 million. The operating budget for this year, proposed FY 2020, which begins in July of 2019, To make those revenue expenditure reductions of approximately $7.9 million, staff has tapped into reducing capital projects, reduce one-time operating expenses, reduce appropriations to other funds, reduction in liability insurance, reduction in pension-related, personnel-related reductions, of vacant positions through attrition, vacant positions not filling, as I just said, operating department cuts. All of that has led to a discretionary reduction, which I think you'll see on the next page. So if we look at the various categories of Washington County's government's operating budget, you see there, both white and blue, is Board of Education, outside entities, county funds, operating, debt service, wages and benefits. Preparing this budget for you and trying to reduce costs as much as we could. We looked at those funds in blue. The Board of Education will increase by $2 million, as I said, so that does not get a reduction. The debt service, that is an obligation to pay off debt. The county is quite financially sound and will do that. So that was not a discretionary fund either. But I would like to focus on the three that are in blue: outside entities, county funds, operating, wages and benefits. Discretionary budget of $116.8 million. As I said, about $7.5 million, or 6% reduction from FY19. Now, we would like to think, especially in the capital budget, that is a temporary reduction to make up for some lost ground. And we would like to restore those. I will get to that in a moment. But nonetheless, for fiscal year 2020, I need to be very clear that staff is presenting to you a $7.5 million, or 6% reduction from fiscal year 19. So this is not a single ask for more money. This is a reduction on one hand while we ask for additional revenue. FY 2020 and beyond, that additional revenue I mentioned, where will it go? There is a fairly handy graph that's coming up next, but I wanted to get to this listing first. Additional Board of Education funding, pay for debt service, contract increases. So we have contract obligations in which those services simply cost more money. That is not contracts for capital, that is operating contract costs. For instance, some of those were similar to what was approved today. Fuel costs or more, those types of things. Other state mandates, we do have to keep up with permit regulations and state mandates. That does cost more money. Health insurance, various commitments. Fire and EMS has already been mentioned here in this presentation. Accounting for fire and EMS, that will cost at least $100,000 to see that the taxpayer dollars are spent appropriately for at least this year. Turnout gear, police protection equipment, employee step effective September, and the Cascade, if we do not sell that in a more timely fashion, that we do have to program for that increase. While we would very much like not to need to increase the funding to Cascade, we do have to look long range for that potential. And certainly that would be good news if that's not necessary. So the natural question I think that we've heard from both elected officials and the public is where is this additional revenue going? So we've tried as staff, working with our public relations and marketing staff, to address that in as simple as format as possible. And that's what you have here on the screen in these bar graphs. So you can see in the blue is education, in the orange is EMS, emergency medical services, gray is fire, and yellow is capital. Those are the top expenditures. Then we get up into operational, public safety training, so forth and so on. What I'd like to point out here is that over the next 5 years, well, two things. First is that this is the first time we are making every attempt to be entirely transparent with forethought into the next 5 years and working with the commissioners and the public into what the expenses and revenue will look like over the next 5 years. I'd like to applaud Sarah and her office, Public Relations and Marketing, for both coming up with that message and trying to get that message out as most transparently as possible. So this graph attempts to present to you where those additional funds will go. Be glad to answer any questions on those as we move forward. Next, again, another way to try to break down where funding does go in the overall budget, and the top funding recipient, I should say, is education. 49% of your taxpayer dollar, of local taxpayer dollars, goes to education. That's $114 million. The Board of Education receives the vast majority of that. I think that's approximately 43% in total of the total budget. Other goes to library, et cetera, smaller, and it's identified in there, and HCC. Public safety, 23%, $54 million. That includes the existing $7.5 million approximately that goes to fire and EMS, which is only scheduled to increase with the future fiscal years. Other programs and services cover services such as community funding, recreation permits, economic development, state's attorney's office, and things that are not necessarily immediately associated with Washington County government, but entirely necessary. And as we go down to the last two in size of funding, capital operating transfer and general operations, and finally debt service, and that is 6%, where a healthy limit, according to some economists, is 10% of a debt load. Washington County is very financially sound with it 6%, and fortunately, because of leadership, we are in a very good position there. I would like to go back to the graph. It's important to point out one thing very carefully, and I think because this graph's so important, I think Sarah has it as well in your portion. Okay, so I'm glad I went back to it for a second. It's important to say here that each year will be its own fiscal year budget, and the commissioners will be required to approve a budget of some sort each year. This is simply a projection, so these numbers could change, but this is what is projected at this time. And the asterisk in this case is quite important, and that says pending future operating costs, any additional revenue in future years may replenish capital reserves used in FY 2020. What that means is that the county is using capital reserves more so than we have in the past in this proposed budget to keep other expenses down. For instance, we're reducing some of the capital reserves we are spending, and that's very necessary to point out. That's not operating reserves, which are required by our bonding agencies and so forth to maintain 17%. We're well above that at 17.5%. We're not talking about that funding source. We're talking about capital reserves where projects have saved money and so forth over the past. We are using that funding in FY20. And if we do find ourselves in the remarkable position of having more funding than necessary, we would very much like to replenish those funds that we're using this year. So through sound and stable planning, not through just the staff here today, but prior year staff, prior CFO, prior county administrator, they did leave us in a very good position with capital reserves. And we have had savings in the past. It is those savings we will have to rely upon to have a very measurable and smooth financial outlook. So that's what you're seeing here. That's what the asterisk and the accommodation for future year planning is. Thank you. So with that, it's what we've also tried to do is approach this very intelligently with innovative systems that simply how can we reduce expenses to meet our requirements. For instance, the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, told the state of Maryland that you must clean up the Chesapeake Bay watershed. The state of Maryland then approaches each county government in the state of Maryland and says you must do your part to clean up the Chesapeake Bay watershed. Various counties have had various approaches. Other states are also in the same position. We've found, from what I can tell talking to other counties, other states, this is the most proactive position, the most cost-effective position, which also returns the highest investment on each dollar. That is to do street sweeping, meets the model requirements, meets the permit, and we have had countless people tell us when we go out into the community through environmental services that they have not seen such an activity ever in Washington County, and they very much appreciate this approach. So it's a hands-on approach where the public can see what we're doing, and it does good for the environment, and it meets our permit requirements. So it's a win-win-win situation in that case. And we're very proud of the program. I'm very proud of the staff that's been involved, from engineering to environmental management, to the highway department and others. Sarah's staff, public relations and marketing, very involved. This has been a team effort, and so far it's been a complete win for Washington County. Some other innovative solutions you heard before about the Making Connections campaign. Rather than simply spend $1 to build a road, what we look to do is get help to do that through Appalachian Regional Commission, and that is to use those funds of approximately $1 million a year, use those as a carrot toward private investment. With that, we've worked with several private investors, get them to donate land, get them to contribute to the roadway construction, and triple our local dollars, if not quadruple our local dollars, by spending less local money, getting those improvements made, extending roads such as Creighton Boulevard, Halfway Boulevard, Professional Boulevard, and Colonel HK, all projects which return on the dollar has been considerably better than if we simply went out and built a road on our own. And with that, we expect to see economic development improve too. With that, I'll turn it over to Sarah.
Thank you. Okay, so many of you are aware of our largest fund, the general fund, because that's the fund where our taxpayer dollars are budgeted and accounted for. However, it's important to understand that the county actually has 19 funds comprised of more than 150 departments. And that's important because county personnel review and budget over 2,800 account combinations before even presenting the budget to the commissioners. The general fund budget for fiscal year 2020 is $233.8 million. You can see the history of the general fund in the top right graph from 2016 to 2020. It represents approximately 3% increase per year. The lower graph does represent the capital budget. The capital budget for 2020 is $56.3 million and does fluctuate more, obviously, from year to year, as you can see. And that's primarily due to the grants that the county receives, and also potential developer contributions contribute to that as well, that fluctuation. History of general fund revenues is in front of you. The two revenues on the left-hand side of the screen, property tax revenue and local taxes, represent approximately 96% of the county revenue. So the top graph represents property tax revenues, which is $129 million for fiscal year 2020, or 55% of the total budget. This revenue source did increase by approximately $2 million, or 2%, over fiscal year 19, and that's due to estimates from the State Department of Assessments and Taxation. The lower graph representing our local tax history of income and recordation tax revenue did increase approximately $4 million over fiscal year 19, and that's largely attributed to the proposed increase in income tax from 2.8% to 3.2% for fiscal year 2020. And that local tax does represent approximately 41% of county revenue. Over on the right-hand side, we have two other revenue categories that represent much less in total of our county general fund revenue. However, they're still very important. The top graph, history of charges for services, is approximately $6.5 million for fiscal year 2020. It did decrease approximately $2 million over the fiscal year 19 figures, and that is attributed to a lower budget for speed camera revenue. We have seen that our actual experience in fiscal year 19 did differ from our budget for 19 for speed camera revenue, which is good because we are seeing a response to those cameras. However, we're making the adjustment here for the budget going into 2020. The lower graph, history of grants for operations, that just represents operating grants that we receive on an annual basis, fluctuates very little from year to year. So as I just stated, we are not proposing for this fiscal year 2020 budget any change in the property tax rate. However, we are proposing a change in the income tax rate from 2.8% to 3.2%. This change will generate approximately $5.2 million in additional revenue for fiscal year 2020. It will also increase the disparity grant that the county is eligible to receive in future years beginning in 2021. So currently we have an income tax rate of 2.8% and we receive approximately $2 million in disparity grant. If we increase our tax rate to 3.2%, we will receive a total of approximately $6 million in the disparity grant. So the county can really best leverage these state dollars and which would result in less tax over time to our citizens. And this would, on average, cost a household in Washington County approximately $200 per year. So we just spoke a little bit about revenues for the general fund. So what are our county dollars spent on? Well, you can see the largest piece of our pie is represented by education costs, 49%. And that 49% equals approximately $114 million. The Board of Education is proposed to receive $2 million over what they did in fiscal year 19. The next largest category is public safety at 23% or $53.8 million. This category does include both law enforcement and emergency services. And in fiscal year 2020, the county does have budgeted 29 firefighters in conjunction with a SAFER grant that has been applied for. We should find out in the summer if we have received that grant. In addition to that, the county has in the proposed budget $1 million for emergency services. And these costs are reoccurring. We do expect them to grow in the future, which contribute to the need for this tax increase that we've talked about. So combined education and public safety represent 72% of the general fund budget. Aside from those functions, you can see transfers is 6% of the budget, or approximately $14.5 million. These are transfers from the general fund to other funds, such as the highway fund. The highway fund gets approximately $9 million of that $14 million. And then in fiscal year 2020, $3 million is being appropriated to the sewer fund. Capital costs represent $16.7 million or 7% of the budget. And that is for debt service costs, which are principal and interest payments on the bonds that we issue. And it also includes $1.5 million going to the capital plan, which is all related to the speed camera revenue that we receive and will support the project for the police, fire, and emergency services training facility. Courts represent 3% or $5.7 million of the county budget. This category did increase based on 3 new positions that were required to support the new judge for fiscal year 2020. And state costs represent approximately 2% of the budget, or $5 million. This category also increased due to some state mandates, which include same-day voter registration and requirements to facilitate that operation. All other government functions represent 10% of the budget. So as you can see listed, the budget has increased over fiscal year 19 by approximately $4 million. At the top of that list, you have education, a $2 million increase. Law enforcement, $1.7 million increase. and emergency services $2.4 million increase. $6 million additional has been allocated to education and public safety. You also can see the fourth item down, operating transfers, increased by $3 million, and that's related to the sewer fund. But below that, you can see reductions that the county has made to provide for those needs that we have today. 50% of your tax dollar goes to education, 23% to public safety, 7% for roads and infrastructure, and the other 20% is for all other government functions. The highway fund is another one of our largest funds at $11.5 million. You can see on the graph in front of you in orange, the orange bar represents the highway user revenue that we used to receive. In 2009, I believe, or 2007, we received approximately $9 million in highway user revenue. It dropped off in 2010. We have had to supplant those funds with general fund dollars. So this is important to understand because this does not just affect the highway fund, this affects all of our funds, because if we're providing general fund dollars to highway, we can't put it to other use. So that's important to understand. Over the past 10 years, we've probably lost $70 million in highway user revenue. The county does have 9 other governmental funds, which you see on the screen, with approximate budget of $11.6 million. This is an increase over last year of approximately $900,000, but that increase is all related to grants that we expect to receive, mainly from the Land Preservation Fund. County has several enterprise funds, including water quality funds, water, sewer, transit, airport, golf course, and solid waste. Some of the major changes for these funds include additional pension costs based on the pension redistribution. Other than that, the sewer fund has been historically balanced with cash reserves. So there are no cash reserves for fiscal year 2020, which is why there's an appropriation from the general fund. In addition to that, the solid waste fund actually decreased in budget by approximately $500,000, and that's mainly due to the debt service schedule. If you remember, it increased in 2019, and now we're seeing it decreased. It fluctuates these couple years, but it will normalize in about 2 or 3 years. As important as the operating budget is the capital budget. 45% of our capital budget is for educational projects, 17% for road projects, 13% for environmental, 3% for public safety for 2020, and then all other projects represent approximately 20% of our capital plan. The capital plan does include some major projects for education, including Sharpsburg Elementary School, Board of Ed capital maintenance projects, the Barbara Ingram School for the Arts, and the Center for Business and Entrepreneurial Studies for HCC. The Barbara Ingram School for the Arts project is part of the larger UIP, which is approximate $40 million investment downtown, which also includes $7.5 million from the governor. And the UIP is most definitely a partnership between the Maryland Theater, Board of Education, USMH, City of Hagerstown, private developers, and of course the county. The Public Police, Fire, and Emergency Services Training Facility is another large project that we have in fiscal year 2020 with a total budget of $11.5 million. It has a $1.5 million appropriation for fiscal year 2020, which is from the speed camera revenue. Transportation projects include the Runway 927 Rehabilitation Project with a budget of $6.5 million and the Passenger Terminal Hold Room Expansion Project with a budget of $5.5 million, and of course a bus replacement project with just shy of $1 million in cost. What's really important to understand about these projects is that they are primarily grant funded, so the return on investment here is wonderful. We've got a lot of bang for our buck. Environmental projects that are ongoing in the capital plan include the Smithsburg Wastewater Treatment Plant upgrade and the Capacity Management Project. The Smithsburg wastewater treatment plant upgrade will increase capacity for the town of Smithsburg to foster future development. And the capacity management project will construct a new regional pump station in the Morgansville area and will free up capacity for the city of Hagerstown. So those two projects are very important for economic development. This is a new slide since the last time this presentation was given. There is $500,000 added to the capital plan for Board of Education capital maintenance for the future. There are two potential funding sources that are currently being weighed and contemplated. One being the Energy Service Company, also known as the ESCO. The other being additional IAC funding that could be a local match could contribute to. So those two funding sources will be reviewed over the course of the next 6 months or so. Once we are able to evaluate and determine where the better return on investment is, we'll be able to provide those funds for capital maintenance projects. And last but certainly not least, my favorite part of the presentation is that for 2019, we have been able to maintain our bond rating of a AA+, mainly due to strong financial management, low debt burden that Rob spoke about earlier. So this rating is very important to the county because we're able to secure a lower interest rate, which over time saves the county hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we're happy to receive that. And with that, I think I'll turn it to you, Rob.
Sure. So, again, I don't know if we can appreciate the amount of work that Sarah and her staff, Budget and Finance, has placed in trying to make this a budget balance presentation for the commissioners and taking the input since the last 2 weeks. I do want to say that it does go across the entire staff, though. All 800 approximately staff members are involved in this budget and what the services they bring to Washington County. I don't believe there's a single staff member out there that's not doing their own to pull the weight of Washington County services. You know, our slogan, our motto is dedication to customer service. Commitment to customer service and dedication to progress. And with that, I think one of the fine examples, while some other organizations have taken on additional pay increases, the staff, without any type of hiccup, has said we will certainly delay to provide the services necessary, any type of wage increase, and reduce that increase as well as through attrition, losing some positions that we may be able to sustain, to see that the budget is met for Washington County government. So with that, I just want to say thank you to the staff members, to the commissioners that have all of you working through this budget process with us, but certainly to the staff members that have been involved in this. And in my mind, again, I'm going to say that's each and every one of them that continues to pull the weight for Washington County government while we do our best to bring you a balanced budget. So I think with that, we will go ahead and turn it over to the public to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob and Sarah.
Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is a public hearing concerning the proposed tax rates and county budget. We will now hear public comment, and the hearing will proceed in the following manner. We will take comments in order for which the individuals have signed in to speak. If you wish to speak but haven't yet signed, I believe Tiffany is still out in the hallway, or we could address it here if you like. Individuals be allowed 3 minutes to testify. In the interest of time, if you agree with the position of someone who has previously testified, you may simply identify yourself and state that you agree with the prior speaker. We will then move on to the next speaker. You may only speak once during this meeting. I'll call 2 names at a time, and the next person can begin making their way to the microphone there. Please be respectful and use the appropriate decorum, and we thank you for actively participating in the political process. Come up, state your name and address. The first person I have is Sam Redding. Please come forward.
Good evening. I appreciate this opportunity. I am a little embarrassed to say that at my advanced age, this is the first time that I've attended a meeting like this. I'm Sam Redding. I live in Terrace Hills, a section right north in the county. Been moved up here 15 years ago from Montgomery County, Bethesda, Maryland. Been very pleased every year that I've been up here. I also thank the leadership for over the past 15 years not increasing the assessed property rate, but I'm also aware now that with my recent increase in assessed value, along with possibly a 5-cent or better increase in the assessed rate, I'm going to be paying property tax equivalent to what I did in Montgomery County. Also, I'd like to comment to say that the 3.2% local income tax that either has been approved or you're considering is also the same as Montgomery County. So I think Washington County has finally arrived, and we are equitable with our sister county in Montgomery County. The comment that I'd like to make is that, and again, my information comes from the Herald Mail, so I apologize for if I'm incorrect in my assessment. I read a day or two ago that the Board of Education received $9 million, and if the presenters here already stated that, then I apologize. I couldn't hear very well. They received an additional funding of $9 million. And it seemed to me that, again, what I read in the newspaper, that the budget had already been approved. So I hope that I can assume that that additional $9 million would be put into some sort of escrow fund for future endeavors for the Department of Education. It just seems to me that that was a grant that we didn't expect, and that should not necessarily be used in this fiscal year, and that it would be possibly put in reserve for future commitments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Redding. Please forgive me, I forgot to announce. Barbara Hovermel, you're up, and on deck is Jerry DeWolf.
Good evening. My name is Barbara Havermill, Spielman Road, Williamsport. I spoke to you last month about the same subject. I'm here tonight. Do not vote for a tax increase, either property or income. Going back to last year during the primary election, 2 of the 3 commissioners who voted this year to raise taxes said then they would not raise taxes. Did they do a thorough search and go line by line thoroughly through the budget to identify and reduce expenditures where possible? That is what Commissioner Wagner said he would do to make legitimate cuts before ever considering a tax hike. Did that happen? I learned that since 2015, revenue property taxes increased from around $118 million to $123 million. Total revenues have increased from about $204 million to $221 million. That is a 4.8 increase and a 8.4 increase, respectively. During the same time, the expenditure line of general operations increased from $3,600,000 to about $4,800,000 in 18. What is the reason for such an increase, and did ever audits take place? It is high time that the county government spend taxpayers' money more efficiently, appropriately, and smarter. The numbers I just mentioned came from an article in the Herald Mail on June 18th of last year, at which time Commissioner Milo Schmidt also said he was not going to raise taxes in 19. There would be no need for any tax increases, in my opinion, if the Board of County Commissioners were to enforce the adequate public facility ordinance or excise tax on the books for quite a while, across the board, fairly and equally to all wanting to do business in this county. Washington County should not build a $15 million bridge for developers, again looking to skirt what is legally theirs to pay for infrastructure. Please remember, we not only agree to put infrastructure down, We then must maintain it forever. This bridge property will then, once finished, be accessed by the city of Hagerstown. I think this is ridiculous, it's wrong, and it's bad. It should not happen. There is no need for tax increase, if any of any kind. Hold on a second. There is no need for tax increases of any kind. All you need to do is apply our rules, laws, and ordinances equally to all, regardless of their name, rank, or serial number. That is how we have to work our houses and homes, every homeowner, to make it work. County government must do the same with our tax dollars. Do not spend more than we have. No tax increases for the year 2019. Thank you.
Jerry DeWolf and Amy Olak, you're on deck.
Good evening. My name is Jerry DeWolf. I'm a resident of Keedysville. I'm the chairman of the Washington County Republican Central Committee, but I am not here to speak on their behalf tonight. I'm here to speak on my behalf. I'm a husband, father of 3, resident of South County. 20 years, the Board of County Commissioners hasn't raised property taxes. You've maintained a AA+ bond rating. You've weathered the economic storms. You've had recessions, depressions. You've fared better than most. We see time and time again the county staff showing presentations of lean budgets. I want to thank all of you here tonight, particularly the county commissioners. You guys were elected by the conservative majority folks of this county. 150,000 folks. The counties to the east, we have 250,000, Frederick County, Montgomery, so on and so forth. Question is, what that I'd like to ask each of you tonight is, why were you each elected? What is the purpose of you being here to preside over the county? Okay, what is the purpose of government? It's to provide essential services for the people. Okay, you've done a fantastic job so far. You guys are doing great work. You're doing all that you can. But you're also it isn't really fair what's happening to you guys here, okay? We are looking at unfunded state and federal mandates that are being burdened to you county commissioners, to our school board, and to other departments in our county government. Why is that? In my estimation, it is the tax and spend liberals in Annapolis and in Washington. And our national, we have $22 trillion in debt. Both parties have put us there, okay? It's not just one. So here, fire, emergency services, EMS, police, law enforcement. Yeah, I've heard time and time again about our emergency services, our ambulances. If you, maybe just the people that should use the ambulance service should be taxed or whatnot. Well, I'd also ask those people, well, what if you called a police officer, for help? Should you be given a bill then? What if your house burnt down? Should you be given a bill to pay for the fire department to come for that? So what is the purpose of our essential services that the government provides? It's just that, essential services. And there's a multitude of them that you provide, road services, infrastructure, so on and so forth. You presented that all tonight, time and time again. So my question is, so we go through the numbers and we look at, what we can afford and what we can pay for. You guys have a really difficult job here. You have to balance the modes. You have to do what's best for the county residents. Now, as a fiscal conservative, I'm never for tax raises. I get that. No one is. You guys weren't elected for that. You 5 Republicans. However, here we are. We're at a precipice in our county. What is the purpose of our government? It's to provide for the essential services of our people, our law enforcement. Our county school systems, we got tens of $millions in deferred maintenance. And I understand they have unfunded state mandates that are levied by them that are also unfair to them, that they have to balance. Line item by line item, you can go through those, and we can see those unfunded mandates. And it's not fair to them, it's not fair to you, but here we are. Additionally, you go across the budgets. So one of the other things I'd like to say is people are always talking about how county staff, there's 800 plus, Mr. Slocum continues to tell us. And is it fair that no one of the 800 ever receive a pay raise? Well, no, that's not fair either. You wouldn't ask that for anyone in private sector. I'm in private sector. But is it fair and balanced? And that's the task that you all have, to make it fair, to make government responsible to the people, which you are. And So it's a really challenging situation that we have here tonight. So I thank you each for all that you've done. I just ask you to simply remember what you were elected to do in your oaths, and that is to lead county government. You know, and our state and federal governments would have a lot to learn by our own county government here. You guys should be proud of yourselves. I'm proud of you, and I thank you for all of your service and all that you do. And I hope that you guys have a task ahead. I don't envy your decision, and good luck.
Thank you. Thank you. Amy Olak, you're up, and on deck is Mr. Russ Weaver.
Hello, I'm Amy Olak, the CEO of the Washington County Commission on Aging, located at 535 East Franklin Street in Hagerstown, Maryland. I want to start by saying thank you for your investment in seniors, because it's also an investment in your own personal future. Society as a whole has responded to the baby boomers from the time they were born. Healthcare has responded, schools have responded, industries have responded, and the economy as a whole has responded. Now it's time to respond to seniors as they need senior services that are not available. In the last 3 years, there's been an increase in unduplicated persons served by 67% with flat funding from the county. 185% increase in membership of the Senior Center, and in 2018, we came in at 1,818 members. Many of our programs have waiting lists, one of which you're most familiar with is our Meals on Wheels program. It has 60+ medically homebound seniors waiting for a meal. There's a 6-week appointment wait time to get an access appointment for our Maryland Access Point. As I mentioned before, the cuts in our funding from the state and federal government are related to things that you have no control over, and that is population growth in other counties. And so Census 2020 is essential for us because we are looking at a approximate $30,000 overall decrease in state and federal funds. Of that, $15,000 will affect our congregate sites. 43% of our staff currently sit at less than the mandated minimum wage requirement coming in 2025. And so as we look at this, we hope that there's an opportunity for us to continue to strategically plan for the seniors and the services that are coming available and the needs of these individuals that are on fixed incomes. You know, as a nonprofit, we rely on the support of the county and the state and the federal government to sustain viable senior programs, and we look forward to your continued support and partnership. Thank you for each and every one of you and the support that you give seniors.
Thank you, Amy. Russ Weaver, you're up, and Ward Flieger, you're on deck.
Hello, I'm Russ Weaver, Vice Mayor of Sharpsburg. I'd like to say one thing. I've been involved in town government for 30-some odd years, and we've never raised taxes. But I will say this to the county commissioners: if we had to absorb the local EMS and local fire company, we would be raising taxes. There would be no way we could absorb it. I don't see how you guys can absorb it either. So we understand in the town of Sharpsburg, and we talk about this a lot, the challenges that you guys have. I'd also like to thank you all for providing us with a model of the water and sewer. It's helped a great deal. I apologize for not being able to get back to anybody because I didn't get it until almost Memorial Day. Memorial Day is kind of busy in the town of Sharpsburg, so we didn't have time to come back. I would like to ask Court just one quick question. The 3% raise in sewer rates that you're talking about, is it incorporated in an overall 10-year plan that includes like 3% this year, 3% next year, and so on for the next several years?
Yeah, this one exception.
Yeah,
We normally don't respond, but this.
Okay, I can just ask my questions and you can respond later.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. So the theory is if we had a 3% and a 3%, and then in the 2021 budget, 2022 budget, correct me, we have about $1.5 million, maybe a little bit less than that, of bonds coming off of that. And then we have about a $3 million deficit, annual deficit there. So that brings it down to a 1.5, give or take.
Well, that's really good. That's good news. And I didn't get that from your presentation. I assumed it was something like that.
Yeah,
If you have a model behind that, we'd like to see it as
Yeah,
well.
and then it's all we've got it, and then There's accounting savings that they're looking for of about $1 million of personnel.
Okay.
For retirement. So think about our deficit by 2022 should be about $500,000. And with a couple of rate increases, we should be able to make up that deficit and have a self-funding sewer fund.
Well, I congratulate all of you on that hard work. On the other side of the thing, I'll just make this statement. I'm getting a little confused here tonight. I don't believe we have any property taxes in the current budget proposal. So we took a look at the average person and the average property value in Sharpsburg. We also looked at all the other municipalities in the county as well, and we ran the numbers for the budget that you presented the last time, which was the increase in property taxes both this year and next year, along with an income tax increase, versus now the 0.4 increase in personal income. I believe this is a true statement. If it's incorrect, I'd like to get your feedback. I believe the current plan is more affordable than the previous plan, even with 0% increases in water and sewer. I think if you throw water and sewer into the current plan, the total debt on the average household in Washington County is less than what was in the previous plan. And I think that's a good improvement. And so if that is a true statement, I'll couch what I'm saying. If that's a true statement, the town of Sharpsburg supports the current budget. Okay?
There's no property tax being proposed.
No property tax.
Nope.
All right, next up, thank you, Mr. Weaver. Ward Flieger. And there's no one on deck, but we'll call for someone else after.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I've got to dash off to the town council meeting. Ward Flieger, 109 Colton Court, Smithsburg. It's an honor to be here. I'm representing the Washington County Volunteer Firefighter Association as a subcommittee, the EMS committee as a co-chair. I had to write this stuff down so I don't forget. I know you've been well educated and we've heard our needs a million times, but I'd like to just present a national statistic to y'all. Irreversible brain death happens in 4 to 6 minutes. Flashover, which means the entire combustion of this room turning into an inferno, occurs in 4 to 6 minutes. Without your support in providing staffing and rapid response time with both fire and EMS, enables us to provide that intervention in that 4 to 6 minute response time. It saves lives, and we see it every day. We saw it last week on a car crash where we were able to extricate 2 patients in 4 to 6 minutes and fly them to a trauma center within that golden hour. It saves lives. And again, I want to thank you all for your support. Your support's been incredible, and we really appreciate that. I'd like to thank Director Hayes, President Moncrief, President Todd Smith for your continued support for us. So I just wanted to provide that statistic and let you all absorb that a little bit. Again, pursuing this sustainable revenue source for EMS and fire, we really appreciate that. It'd be nice to come in here next year and not have to worry about that aspect of this budget part. I know Sarah would appreciate it. Last, as a taxpayer and a citizen of Washington County, the school board or public education, I want to extend my support for them. Again, as an example, my son Samuel is going to graduate next week from Smithsburg Middle School, and the teachers helped him do that. They didn't have to. They went above and beyond the call to help him out, and he was going to wash out, and they made sure that didn't happen. And God love the teachers. They deserve hazard pay from my Sam, that's for sure. So that's about it. I got to dash off to a council meeting now. I'm not going to go lights and sirens. I'll go nice and smooth. So again, thank you for everything and your support. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Ward.
Thank you.
Seeing no more names on the list, one last chance for folks to come forward, give their name and address to comment. Is there anyone else who would like to comment? Okay, seeing none, I'd like to close out the testimonial time. Mr. Downey, should I close out the hearing and then go to commissioner thoughts, or what's the correct procedure?
Let's close the public hearing.
I will now close the public hearing, and we will now go to commissioner comments. Who would like to begin? Anybody?
I'll talk.
Go ahead. Thank you for being so courteous, Richard.
Good evening. I guess we're going to make commissioner comments now. It's been said by a couple of speakers. I think everybody misses the point sometimes. Yeah, I am a conservative Republican, like one of the speakers said, but sometimes there comes a time you just got to take charge. This didn't happen in 6 months since I've been elected, that we have a crisis in fire and rescue. We've been mandated sewer. It costs what Smithburg went from $2 million to $7 million because of mandates from legislation. You know, we have great legislators here in Washington County, but they're outnumbered down the road. So we can't get anything accomplished. We had sewer. We got a $15 an hour mandate coming at us for minimum wage. We have highway revenue been cut. We have speed camera revenues being cut. We got Kerwin report, which I'm totally all for. I'd love to give education all I could give it. We gave them an extra couple million this year. I think it was from last year. That's mandated, and a little bit extra. But next year, it could be 3 or 4 million. We don't know what it's going to be with the Kerwin report. And if it's mandated, half of our budget, we can't cut a whole lot more. We're already cutting down to like $7.5 million just from the county. It's hard to cut anymore. And it was said that I made a promise to go through and look. We looked. We've been looking for 3 months. We've been cutting everywhere we can for 3 months. When a rescue company comes to you and said, we're broke, what are you going to do? Y'all, the ones that complain or don't complain, or even, I respect everybody's vote and everybody's thoughts. But when an ambulance or a fire engine doesn't show up at your house, people are going to die. And I'm not being over dramatic. It's going to happen. We got some problems. So the people who, if we have to raise these taxes, will be the first ones to say, my golly, the county commissioners killed my loved one because they didn't fund the ambulance or the rescue. So that's sort of the way I feel about that. And, county's doing a lot. We're not filling positions that retire. We can't beat up just on all the county employees forever. I mean, everybody's got to take a little bit of blame for this and a little bit of share and try to get our revenues back up a little bit. We'll get them back up. I mean, maybe we should have been doing this 5 years ago. But you can't fight City Hall, and City Hall's state of Maryland legislation right now. They're hard on us. Montgomery County, Frederick County, they can absorb it a little better than what Washington County can. So anyway, that's pretty much all I have. Just want to make sure everybody's on the same page that we're doing the best we can to control the spending. Again, it's been a long time since we had to raise revenues. Real long time, 19 years if I'm not mistaken. I hate to be the one that might have to do it, but it hits the wall once in a while. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, Randy. Any other commissioners like comment?
I have a few comments here, and it was just said now that we haven't raised revenues in 19 years, and that's not necessarily true. It's called a passive tax increase because the values of your homes and your properties have increased because you're making more money now than you did 2 decades ago. Even though you're being taxed at that same percentage, the county revenues have grown. And in fact, in those 19 years, it's grown by $88.2 million. We are generating this year, without a tax increase, $88.2 million more than we did 19 years ago. I jotted down a few notes, and I'm going to jump around all over the place here, but I certainly don't want to leave our employees out. I understand that it's important for the employees to have a to have a pay increase. I know that there was an article, and I think today's, maybe yesterday's newspaper about the increase that the school board might get, and it's a little more than what our employees would get. But during the last 3 budget cycles that I've been a part of here at the county, our employees actually got a 20% pay increase over the last 3 budget cycles. So I think we have worked to take care of our employees. I have a little bit of a concern about taking any tax increase, but taking our income tax rate from 2.8 to 3.2%. We're maxing out the credit card when we do that. The reason we're stopping at 3.2% is because the state of Maryland says you can't go any higher than 3.2%. I don't think it would be very good for us to tell our citizens that we have the highest tax in the state of Maryland here in Washington County on our income tax. 3.2% is the max. That's the highest we can go. With the Board of Education, whether or not we were to increase taxes or not, the Board of Education is going to get their maintenance of effort. That's law. We have to provide that. We are providing $24,000 over maintenance of effort. To put that into perspective, last year's budget, we met maintenance of effort, and we added an additional $250,000. So 10 times that amount is what we provided last year. So I know we didn't have anybody necessarily speak out at this budget hearing. We did it 2 weeks ago, and I'm sure their sentiments are just the same, that more money for education, raise my taxes, we need more money for education. Well, the proposal does raise taxes, it does that part, but it doesn't give any more to education. I understand the capital component that we're contributing, but that doesn't work to add teachers and salaries and the mental health professions that we need in the school. So just keep that in mind. When you say that we need to increase taxes, we haven't done that. We have increased taxes. $88.2 million more a year is what we're generating. I think that's a number that we're overlooking often.
Wayne, are you saying that over a year or over the last 10 years?
10 years.
This year, we are generating $88.2 million more this year than we did 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So last year's
And a lot of that's going to the school board too, for the maintenance.
it's 88% of their maintenance of effort, yeah.
So not a lot of that's going to directly our services on the school board.
It was also said a little bit about some state mandates and highway user revenues, and I know that's impacted us. We went from 9 million to 400,000. I mean, that's a huge cut to not receive from one year to the next. But of this budget, we're only contributing 200,000 more towards roads. And I can say that's the number one concern I get from citizens, the condition of our roads. And I don't think that this budget, even though we're having that influx of revenues, I don't think we're addressing that quite adequately. So my comments for now.
Thank you, Wayne. Any other comments?
Yeah, I've got a couple. There was a comment about an article or letter that I wrote about 4.8 million in the Herald Mail, and I would like to say that was specifically addressed. That $4.8 million, majority of that was pension costs that were on the general fund instead of being distributed equally apart across all of the funds. That is now done, so that did actually increase all of our enterprise funds cost because we attributed that over there. And then at the same time, I did go line by line. I was actually part of the retirement committee going over the pension, looking at that because that's what I do, and reduce the expenses that we contribute by $1 million a year. And that's reoccurring revenue. That's not the sale of a property. That's $1 million per year that we went through. And at the same time, that's actually going to be able to increase the percentage funding to our employees, going from currently, I think it's about 58% funding currently, and increasing that. So that's one thing, I did go line by line through this. I did ask questions. I did work with the people trying to find the areas. The reason why I suggested the 3.2% going from 2.8 to 3.2%, because as everybody knows, that was my suggestion 2 weeks ago. I don't think that budget was going to pass with the 5 cent and the 3%. I did not think that budget was going to pass. I'm not going to vote no for something without having a solution. By going to 3.2%, we're leveraging the state's money. I wouldn't say it's a credit card because we're not taking any debt on, it's revenue. But by doing that, we go from a $2 million disparity grant to increasing that to $6.7 million because it's $6,750,000 because it's a 67.5% match. So we get that. So we get $6.7 million. The following year, that does reduce to $6 million. I'll take that $700,000 this year when we can, or next year when we can, because that's money that we can use. The minimum wage, that's something that I was down in Annapolis fighting tooth and nail to try to do everything we can. We lost that battle. if we kept the same rate and wage scale, that's going to increase our employee costs by $30 million. If we kept the same wage and rate scale. We're not going to be able to keep the same rate and wage scale. That's going to be impossible. $30 million of increased expenses. That's a huge, huge amount. One thing that has not been brought up today that I've been talking about as much as possible down in Annapolis is the Medicaid reimbursement. This needs to be one of our top priorities for next year's legislative session. Currently, the state of Maryland, you get $100 for a Medicaid reimbursement call. So an ambulance goes and gets you, it's $100. Pennsylvania, it's Pennsylvania is $150, or for a BLS, $300 for an ALS call plus mileage. Maryland, we get no mileage. West Virginia is $377.50 plus mileage. Again, we get no mileage. This is something that I've already been talking to our lobbyists and our delegation down there, that this needs to be a priority. I've been down with the MACO because, as what we've heard, our delegation can fight tooth and nail, but we're outnumbered. So we need to get Montgomery County, we need to get PG County, we need to get Baltimore City in on this too, because once we get their delegations and our delegations together, then maybe we can make a difference. But if we just went from $100 to $200, so still below the other states, that's an extra $400,000 that comes to Washington County to help pay for the EMS. So when I went through this budget, I tried to get the most bang for our buck, leveraging it out. We heard some stuff about the school board. Yes, we only gave them $24,000 and change above maintenance of effort, but as we also just read in the paper, they got, I think, an additional $6 million from the state over the additional $9 million they got before they got our budget. The additional $2 million that we got them, I don't remember all the numbers, but it was mainly for pre-K teachers, counselors, EL teachers. So there's a lot in there that they're going to be able to do with their budget. And with this additional money, they're going to be able to do more than what the proposed budget was. So I'm very comfortable with this budget. I think it's lean. If we did not do this increase, the sad thing is where do we cut? And the places that we're cutting, if we don't do this, if you sit there and look at it, it's personnel. We are going to have to cut personnel. We constantly get reorganizations. They constantly get shot down. That's what's going to happen. Then it's going to be outside agencies cut. That's things like Commission on Aging. That's the museums. Those things will get cuts if we don't have a revenue increase. I believe we kicked the can long enough. We were running a $3 million deficit in the sewer fund, and for years we've been doing slight increases on that sewer fund. We still have a $3 million a year deficit. Part of that increase was because of the reorganization of the pensions to the enterprise funds. And we spent down our reserves. Now we have to pay for it.
Okay, any other commissioner comments? Commissioner Baker?
I'm going to have some here in a little bit. If you have some, you can.
No, I don't have any at the time, so I'll yield to you.
Okay, so you're going to go to me. Listening to the presentation here this evening, and I'll be pretty blunt. I'm not in support of any tax increases in our income tax rate or our real estate tax increases. It was stated there this evening that our county is financially sound. I thought I heard that during the presentation. So if we are so financially sound, why are we going to be raising taxes? At the last presentation, I heard at the beginning of the presentation that our county goal is to raise the tax base, not the tax rates. So I don't know why we have that as a county goal, and I don't know why the comments made that we're financially sound. Well, obviously, some commissioners don't think we're as financially sound as presented. Here again, we're going to be raising taxes on the income tax rate from 2.8 to 3.2%. I find this as gouging our working man. People work hard for their money. I'm a conservative Republican. I believe in less government, less taxes. And to take the tax rate from 2.8 to 3.2 because of the disparity grant, they just talked about the highway user revenue funds we lost. Who's to say the state needs money? One of the first things they're going to cut is the disparity grant. So we're going to be without the disparity grant. And then we have no room for growth. I really appreciated the comment by the fella that spoke first, we're going to be at Montgomery County tax rates. If you want to be at Montgomery County tax rates, move to Montgomery County. I don't want to be there. We're also throwing around the word pilot, payment in lieu of taxes. We have solar companies coming from all over, who knows where from. They come into our county. The commissioners vote to give them a payment in lieu of taxes over a 20, 30, 40-year period where they don't have to pay their tax rate that they should be paying. But we're expecting the people that have been in our county their whole entire lives, moved here because they can afford to live here, and we want to gouge them. We want to take their income tax rate from 2.8 to 3.2%. It doesn't make sense to me, commissioners. Why are we giving tax breaks to people we don't know, never been to our community, probably don't even come here when they put the pile or the...
Terry, don't, you're going to ask me questions, I'm going to answer
Well,
them.
let me finish. Don't interrupt me. They come in here and they want to put the solar panels in, give them tax breaks. 2 or 3 years ago, we had Jesse James from Florida, owner of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers Stadium, the Herald Mail. You did a horrible job on the article. They come in to renovate Bethel Gardens. Commissioners voted to let them pay home taxes, $80 a house for the next 40 years. To me, that's not right. People in our community work hard for the money. They want to keep their money, and I certainly don't support tax increases. And I get nervous when I talk. So,
Sorry, take your time.
okay, so in court, I've heard you talk, actually, I shouldn't say court, commissioners, I've heard them talk about, well, it's only $200. That's a lot of money to me. Only $200. I don't get it. So it's just kind of hurtful that we're going to be sitting here raising, I'm not going to raise taxes, but you could possibly have an increase in your income tax from 2.8, 3.2, no room for more expansion in the income tax base and the income tax if you need it. So for me, I'm a no for any income tax or property tax increase. Thank you.
Andy, you have some responses? There.
You know, I'm going to let it go, so let's move on. I'm going to let that go.
Okay. Well, what I'd like to, again, the only question about tax base, raising our tax base revenue is not keeping up for cost of services. There's many volunteers out here know that in the last years I've been a commissioner, your number of calls are increasing, the increase for training is increasing, the cost of service for DOT, tanker repair. I've been told by several top fire chiefs in this county, there's at least 10 companies with first due equipment needing to be replaced by, I guess it's MIMS or MRFA, whatever the state association is, where each one of those vehicles are going to be $500,000+ Where does that money come from? And I'm going to support this proposed tax increase because I want an ambulance there when you call for it. I want a fire truck there when you need it. We have 30% of all fire calls with these trucks are going out what they call light, but 2 people only. If you're screaming out your window, burning up, they're not allowed to go in that building to save your life. Think of this, 30% of these fire engines going out are light. 2 weeks ago, or 2 consecutive weeks in a row, Clear Spring didn't have a paramedic or an EMT, one for 4 hours, one for 8. That meant county government had to put staffing up there to make sure that that community was safe. You saw the facts with Smithsburg, how the county came in to help them out, continue service there. The SAFER grant, first year $550,000, second year $550,000, third year $1.2 million, then we take it over at $2.1 million. Where do we get that money to secure your safety? When your house is burning down and every piece of belonging and your loved ones are in there, it is our responsibility to provide the service. No, I don't want to raise taxes either. But one of our tough decisions, are we going to provide the infrastructure, public safety, and education to provide for the needs of this county? And I'd rather have you mad at me and have an ambulance and a fire truck when you need me than to vote no on this and to make sure that we shorten our volunteer system. So with that being said, are there any other follow-up questions? So what I'd like to propose here, that someone makes a motion with the...
I'll make the motion to increase I'll make the motion for the budget increase in the income tax rate from 2.8% to 3.2%. Making sure that also that is in there is the Washington County CIP, that we have money contingent to the approval of the RFQ. A successful RFQ, I guess, would be the proper words, within 45 days. There we go.
And how about approving the capital budget, adopting the operating budget
Individual
proposed?
motions. Commissioners, let's do individual motions.
Individual.
And then I'll make,
Let's do first to adopt the proposed income tax rate.
do the rate or just the budget?
You need to set the rate because the
I-
budget is based on the rate.
Okay, then I will propose to increase the income tax rate from 2.8% to 3.2%.
I have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, I call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those saying no?
No.
3-2, thank you. I guess the next would be to adopt the capital budget.
Or do we need to approve the operational budget first? I make the motion to approve the operational budget.
Either order is okay.
I would say operations.
Operational first.
I second that.
I have a first and a second to approve the
The operational
operational
budget,
budget with,
Which included
You.
3.2 tax increase.
it's based on a 3.2% tax increase, but it includes the 2.5%.
It includes the 2.5% wage scale.
Yes, including
be
the
part of the
the
motion.
conversion 2.5% wage scale and the increase of wages increase at September to the 2.5%. So do we also need to go over the increase, the $15,000 on the Commission on Aging? And I think that was it.
Doesn't sound like that's much, when we're increasing taxes that much, you're only giving the seniors $15,000.
we're giving them over $800,000 at
Well, I
the full
mean,
request from the
his request.
community fund.
I am amenable to anything. If you
I'm
can,
not gonna support it, but I mean.
you can find a line item to reduce to give them more money, I'm
Okay.
fine.
We have a motion on the floor. Is there a second? And we can continue that discussion.
I second.
I have a first and a second. Mr. Baker, any more discussion? All right, thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those not in favor say no.
No.
3-2. Next, the capital budget. Motion.
I'll make the motion to approve the capital budget with the $500,000 increase to the Washington County CIP contingent upon an ESCO RFQ, successful completion of an ESCO RFQ. Or what is that other?
I'd like to request your consideration for successful execution of the work contemplated under the scope of the RFQ, or an IAC contribution, which would be 71% match from the state, which would be a heavily returned investment as well. So either, apparently we are, however, there is word, I've spoken to the superintendent about this, there is potential that they could find additional funding. They would not know that until later this year, later this calendar
You want to
year.
restate that with
Then I'll make the motion for the capital budget with the $500,000 to the Washington County Public Schools contingent on an ESCO or a
IAC matching funds.
IAC matching funds.
motion. Is there a second?
I second.
I have a first and a second. Is there any more discussion?
Yeah, Court, when did we discuss that $500,000 for the Board of Education?
2 weeks ago.
Also, that's when you blindsided us with that copy of information that you had. It looks to me like you're raising taxes and you can't wait to spend the money.
This is capital money. This has nothing to do with the
Where's the
operational budget.
Where's the $500,000?
So that's in the capital budget.
It's come from the taxpayers, I think.
So, well, it'd be the exact same thing. You know, we can talk about the.
No, I know that was in the information that you blindsided at least me with 2 weeks ago.
Well, I thought 2 weeks ago was an open hearing when we're going to be discussing
No,
the
you
budget.
knew what you were
and-
you
and
knew what you were doing
If you're
2 weeks
if you're going to interrupt me, then let me finish. But I thought it was an open discussion, and I'm not going to vote no for a budget unless I have a solution. Voting no for budget without a solution, I think, is irresponsible. I won't try to go through this budget, and I was going to vote no for that 5-cent and 2-cent increase because I thought it was too much money. We didn't need $7.4 million in the sewer fund. I think we needed $3 million. So yes, I came out with a proposal that I thought had the ability to pass.
Okay, any more discussion?
I have a question. The capital budget that includes the RFQ, I would just like staff to do a little bit of research, not extensive research. I have some misgivings. I'm voting no, but I have some misgivings that we're tying a budget decision to a request for a proposal. I don't think that's a clean way to do it. So I would just like to ask staff if we can go back to the last few budgets that we've approved. Has the capital budget or operating budget ever been tied to an outside ancillary vote? That
Well, we
seems
can do that
peculiar
if
to
the
me.
motion's approved
Yeah,
or
ju- just-
rejected.
ju-
You can-
If I may, for the record, say it's not just the RFQ, and that's what I wanted to be important, is important to be clear on, is that it would be the successful execution of the work contemplated on that, or IAC funding, which would be a 71% return, or 71 to 29% return on dollars spent for energy savings in Washington County Public Schools. So if this funding would allow, this presentation, as I understand it, allows for $500,000, which would return significant money on investment for energy savings in public schools.
The
Not
energy
simply the
savings,
RFQ.
The request for quote, the energy savings is a contract that we or the Board of Ed, I suppose if it's their buildings, would enter into a contract with an outside third-party company for their services where we would buy some of their equipment, lease it over a certain period of time frame. That's the meeting that I was part of a couple months ago, weeks ago maybe.
Yeah. So what it's trying to do is if we have a way that we can leverage money, so either through the IAC or through an ESCO, that we can reduce their capital, their deferred maintenance, because I keep hearing it's over 100 and some odd years that deferred maintenance, and we can leverage some of our taxpayer dollars. That's what it's for. Now, if it doesn't work, then there's no reason to give them the additional money above that IAC money, so they're getting that 71% match.
I don't think it's appropriate, my personal feelings alone, to tie a capital budget into procuring services with an outside entity. I just don't think that's clean in my opinion, but I'm voting no regardless, so it doesn't matter.
All right, we have first a motion. Second. We have a motion on the floor. All in favor, say aye. Yes.
Aye.
Yes. Those not in favor, say no.
No.
3-2. I think, Mr. Downey, I can clears up everything we need to vote on today.
It does.
That's it. A motion to adjourn.
A motion to adjourn.
Need a second to adjourn?
Second that.
Thank you very much, everyone. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Adjourn.